Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, Associate Editor of Audioholics, and I'm here with...
Rob H. This is AV Rant, the show where we answer your questions about all things home theater and audio video. And right off the top of the show, we're sending out a reminder. This is the last week for the foreseeable future when we will be recording on Monday night. If you would like to come and join us and watch the live recording as it happens and join us for our hangout party after the recording session, that will be happening on Tuesdays now, starting next week. So September 2nd, we're moving to Tuesdays. For audio-only listeners, not a big difference.
9 p.m. Eastern Time.
That is correct.
So you can do your own little transformation of that. Those of you that have been complaining about my camera, I'm working on it. I'm going to get a new camera. I'm going to call Logitech and see what I can do.
Because there's so much to see.
There is so much to see. Me and my shirts of slackitude. What else we have to talk about? Okay, so we're going to change to Mondays. I mean to Tuesdays from Mondays. 9 p.m. Eastern. We start the hangout afterwards at usually 11 p.m. Eastern. That's sort of the after party. Up to 10 total people can show up and ask questions.
I like how we've just accepted that that's the way it's going to be now. These 2-hour-long things. That was never originally the plan, but we've just kind of gotten used to it now.
Well, we'll see what happens. We're gonna try to keep them a little bit shorter this time. But okay, that said, also next week, next week, 2 days from now, so on Wednesday the 27th, I am getting knee surgery, which means I will be, invalid for a bit, and who knows how that's going to affect the podcast. But Lee, if you're listening, or Dina or Liz, if you're listening, you may be getting an email that says, please fill in for me. I am on massive amounts of drugs right now.
Maybe we should ask Ray Coronado, and I can just have the censor button ready. And it's,
Yeah, Ray. Yeah. Well, hey, if I can censor myself, and I curse like a sailor in real life, then Ray can do the same. Perhaps. Anything else? Start off with.
I don't think so. I think we can hop right into our show by starting with our Listener of the Week.
Right. The Listener of the Week this week was Joe S. We're going to talk a little bit more about him later. He became Listener of the Week by going to the website, the podcast page at www.avrant.com. He clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee, and he bought us a cup of coffee. Actually bought us a little bit more than just a cup of coffee. He was very generous. And that's how you become Listener of the Week. And you also get your questions answered, but you don't have to become Listener of the Week to do that. You have to donate. It is nice. It helps support the podcast and keeps us going, pays our bills. But it is not necessary. We will answer your questions. You can get your questions to us by going to our website and asking them there. You can email us at Tom@AVRant or Rob@AVRant. You can tweet us at @FirstReflect for Rob, all one word, and at @AVRant_Tom for me. And though I don't tweet much anymore, I do check Twitter, and I get announcements and notifications when somebody tweets me. And that stuff makes it on the podcast. So, we can also go to facebook.com/AVRantPodcast and like us and ask us questions there. Lots of stuff does get brought up there as well.
Yeah, and if you're not in the mood to donate actual cash money, but you'd still like to help out the podcast, feel free to leave us a rating or write us a review wherever you are downloading the podcast from. That helps raise the visibility of the podcast, gets us new listeners, which is great. We're seeing our likes go up each week and seeing more people join our listening crew here, so that's really fun to see. Happy to see that. And we thank everyone for doing so.
Yes. Last week we had a couple new people in the Hangout. They just kind of hung out and watched and then didn't really interact, which was fine. But feel free. We're an unintimidating crowd. One time we did ignore everybody as we all tried to exhibit the best Google foo, and all of us lost. But usually we interact and talk and say hi and stuff. And if you have a question, it's a great way to get it answered right away, is to come to one of our Hangouts after the podcast recording, which will be on Tuesdays from now on.
Oh, yeah.
That said, Rob was on another podcast, you traitor.
Oh, well, not really, just spreading the word of AV Rant. Hopefully
likely
hopefully
story.
enticing people to come and listen rather than frightening them away, which might actually be equally possible. Yes, the fine folks over at the Digital Media Zone, specifically Josh Pollard and Richard Gunther, they're the hosts of a great show called Entertainment 2.0, where they basically talk all about Microsoft products, specifically Microsoft Entertainment products. So that's Media Center and Xbox and Windows Phone and all that fun stuff. But they wanted to have a little segment of, maybe you're a computer guy and now you want to expand into the world of AV. And so Josh has been a listener of AV Rant and kindly asked me to come and join. And I ended up exploding their normally 1 hour program into a 2 hour episode. So
It is
maybe
you.
I'm,
It is
maybe,
you. It
yeah,
is always you. Hey,
it might be
guys,
me. It
if
might be.
Josh, if you're listening, I'm sorry. Now you know my pain. This is what it's like. I start at an hour and we end up at 2. So it's the Canadian influence.
That's
So
right.
were you talking about your HTPC?
Not very much. I mean, we really went through pretty much all the what we called basics of setting up the home theater. So covering the room, speaker placement, subwoofers, displays, what size you need. Gave a whole bunch of links. Exploded their page with links as well. So it was just an info dump episode. Even some people in their comments were like, "Whoa, info dump episode," and they were correct. So yeah, it was a lot of fun though. We had a really good time.
Yeah. Rob giving away the cow, right? So is that what it is? Yeah, giving away the cow, giving away the milk, get the cow for. I can't remember how that one goes. Anyways, yes. Well, great. I was glad. That's glad. I'm glad to hear that, Rob. That's good for you. I'm glad that you got
Thank you.
invited to do that. That's pretty cool. Paul is a race car driver. Our race car driver. He crashed. Well, got crashed into during a race and had kind of announced that that was going to be it for a season. But after some thought and some consideration and probably some sitting down and being depressed and having a couple of beers afterwards, he looked at his truck and went, "I bet I could put that thing back together." And he sort of kind of did. And so the number 72 AV Rant sponsored street stock race car, he put that thing back together enough to get it into a race and then won. You should have banged up your car earlier. Apparently, aerodynamics that do not apply to you. You just go faster.
It must have something to do with just racing without fear, because they're like, well, the car is already wrecked. So
Maybe
just
everybody
drive
else
the
was
heck out of
afraid
it.
of you. They're like, that guy's racing to that? I'm getting out of his way. That's probably what it was. But that is awesome. So
Yes,
he won.
congratulations. That is pretty darn neato.
Yeah. Keep winning races, man, and AV Rant will be at least 5 more listeners. That'd be awesome. That's so cool, man. I just love the fact that we got a car. No other podcast, I think, can claim that they've got their sticker on the car someplace. I have never heard of one. I mean, maybe perhaps the Twit guys have got enough money to actually sponsor somebody. But
Maybe Adam Carolla puts his own sticker on his own car since he races himself.
there you go. He
He's a
probably does.
podcaster.
Does he still have a
Knowing him, he
podcast, or has he
probably
been
doesn't.
sued out of existence by that
Oh
troll
no,
guy?
they are fighting that thing. And actually, honestly, sometimes people have said we should set up the whole Amazon thing here for sponsorship. But right now, that's over at Adam Carolla. That's what they're doing. Everybody who does through their Amazon link, the whole Amazon sponsorship thing, they're putting all that money into their legal defense fund. And honestly, that's something I personally support, because these dumb patent troll people need to go away and be put in their place. So yeah.
I was at where I don't know where I was. It was either like a school, like the school opening, or a social, like the thing before your kids go to school, like the welcome to back to school day or whatever, or it was a party. I can't remember what, like a dinner party. I can't remember, but I met a patent lawyer, and I was like, "You're a patent lawyer? Like, what kind of patent lawyer are you? Are you the kind that?" And she goes, "No, we're the kind that helps people get patents." I'm like, "Yes, okay, you're not the evil kind." She goes, "No, we're not the evil kind." She could be lying though. I don't know. I think it was. I don't really remember. Anyways, okay. So let's go on to comments and updates. Toby H. Do you want to, let me go through what we're going to be talking about today.
Sure. Yeah.
First, we've got Toby. He'll be talking to us a little bit about his his Denon AVR, his Denon receiver purchase. Ephraim tried Audyssey, and has got some feedback on this from Audyssey. Mark H loves his new Marantz Slimline receiver, but has some comments on Audyssey Dynamic EQ. Apparently, it's an Audyssey episode. John M. sent us an article saying that the iPhone 5S's audio is awesome. We'll explain that. Leighton gave us some really interesting feedback. We've been talking about him for the last couple of podcasts, giving him some feedback on how he should place his speakers and subwoofers and all his little stuff. And he's got some feedback for us, and it's very, very interesting. It's going to include pictures on the Facebook page, facebook.com/AVRant podcast. You'll want to go check those out afterwards. Joe S., our listener of the week, and I met. He's got a living room. He wasn't too far away from me, and he's like, hey, I got some questions. I'm like, where are you? And he told me where he was, and I looked at the weather, and it was going to be beautiful. And I was like, I'm going to get on the motorcycle and come see you. Like, this is the worst excuse for a motorcycle ride ever, but it worked. And I went down and saw him and saw his house under construction and gave him some pointers. We'll talk a little bit about that. Michael R. has some more base management topics to discuss and a surround speaker choice to make. Jonathan F. asks about the somewhat odd design of the Sonos wireless subwoofer. Herb from Cross Spectrum Labs, one of our favorite guys, has a correction for Rob, because I love that. Actually, we got corrected last week too, and we should go ahead and mention it before I forget it again. We were talking about the Onkyo receiver that was getting hot, and I said, and you, I think, agreed, that it was almost certainly the amps. And the guy's like, no, I had the amps off, and it was just video processing. Could it be the video processing? I'm like, I guess it could be, but generally it's the amps. Well, in fact, it was a video processor. We heard from our custom installer listener who said that he has experienced this with not only that receiver, but also with the pre-pro from Integra, which uses the same everything except they take the amps out of it and add some more connections and stuff. And it is, in fact, the video processor. It doesn't have it's not well ventilated. It doesn't have a good heat sink on it, and it gets really super hot. So it is the video processor. So we were corrected.
Ray did mention that last week, so we snuck that in there at the very end. But
did we?
That darn video processing chip apparently is just cooking everything. So hooray for that.
That's got to be the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But okay, Mike G is trying to sort out his XBMC karaoke setup. That's an interesting question for Rob, since what do I know karaoke? Infinite Gary brings us our weekly dose of Atmos discussion topics. Whee! So we'll be talking about Atmos. John B asks about our new, the next generation video game console of choice. We did weigh in on this before they came out. Rob bought both because of course he did. But
in fact, 2 of each.
Yes, you did, because of course you did. But
with your cameras.
Got real issues, dude. And you don't even use them. And so we're going to weigh back in. Rob will weigh back in from the perspective of somebody who owns both and uses neither. And I will weigh in from the perspective of somebody who bought neither and could now be faced possibly with the decision to buy one. What would I do? And finally, Paul B wants to know if it's just him or us, too. That's cryptic. Anyways, so we'll talk about that. He's also got a B&W speaker headphone question for us. There's a whole bunch of news, which we probably won't get to, but whatever. Let's just go back. All right. So that's what you're in for today. We'll probably sneak a couple of subwoofer discussions in there at some point. For those of you that are like, what? No subwoofer? What the hell am I listening to this podcast for?
Leighton's all about the subwoofers.
That's
so
true.
Leighton,
we will have some. Oh, and then somebody else had some.
The Sonos one. There you go.
There's
we got
one.
plenty.
Well, no, then there was the guy who was having problems hearing the difference between his subs on and his subs off with his full range receiver, if you remember that. Full range speakers. All right. Toby H. Got his Denon AVR X2000. Yay! And he's loving it. Yay! We recommended that, right? We said that we gave that our blessing. Yeah, okay. He had a little bit of trouble getting the audio return channel to work between his Vizio TV and the Denon. Vizio support was no help. Shocking no one. Because when you're the kind of company that sells TVs for as cheap as they do, you better believe you're on your own when you get one. But Denon's tech people walked him through it. He uses the Vizio Smart TV feature to watch Netflix and Amazon. So the TV itself is connected to the internet. He streams Netflix and Amazon Prime to the TV, and then audio return channel, which is basically newer receivers and newer TVs have they'll often say ARC on there someplace, and what that means is that audio can both go up the cable and down the cable, so it can go back from the TV back to the receiver. So he's only got to have one connection. Before, what you would have to do is, if you had, just say you were, we keep it really simple. If you're using your TV as your cable box, basically, we're screwing the cable into the TV, well, you had to use either your speakers or had to have some sort of separate cable, usually optical, to go back to your receiver. With audio return channel, you don't have to do that. It's just the same HDMI cable. So, all of his sources are now connected directly to the Denon, including the TV, and the TV is receiving Amazon Prime and Netflix and sending the audio back to his new Denon, and he just loves the fact that he's just got the one cable. So if you're in a situation where you're wondering if, how you're going to get audio around from your TV back to your receiver, that's how you can do it if you have newer stuff. He still hasn't run his Audyssey Multi-QXT, but he will, and overall he feels like this is a pretty good success to start with.
Congratulations, and we love to hear that kind of feedback. So
yes,
thank you so much.
Good. All right, Ephraim, send us an email. Oh God. All right, so Rob's got this theory that if you run Audyssey after you turn the volume knob on your receiver to 0 dB, it is more accurate. Okay, I say that that's ridiculous. In fact, I just was trying to find the Audyssey. I have an Audyssey contact, Chris. Really long last name. I think it starts with a K. It's a really long last name. Anyways, I'm going to email him and ask him about this directly because it's got to be BS. It's got to be. But it seems to work for people. So basically, Ephraim, it worked for him too. He says, but when he ran it normally, he had to change the trim levels because the volumes weren't all the same on the speakers and stuff like that. But when he ran it after turning the volume knob to 0, it came out perfect. So I think this is the universe conspiring to make me angry, basically. Like, it needs to do that. But, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't help but laugh because I was imagining Tom's exact reaction that we just saw here with the rolling of the eyes and the shaking of the head.
It can't be. That's so stupid. They would have. I mean, they've had the Audyssey for so long. They would have either fixed it or told someone about it by now. There's just no way that it works that way. Don't believe it. I refuse.
The only thing is that it's not actually Audyssey doing those settings, right? The distances and the trim levels, and the distances and the trim levels are chosen by the manufacturer. They're the ones who implement that part of the program, even though it's all rolled into the Audyssey automatic setup. It's controlled by the manufacturers, so
I don't care. It can't
Audyssey
work that way.
say, like,
someone would have said something by now. It has been around long enough.
I said something.
You're the only one. If it turns out that you totally discovered this thing, I'm gonna have to give you some sort of
I have created my own myth. I will live on long past the passing of my own life, and people will forever be turning their automatic.
He's the 0 dB guy, who makes all podcasts 2 hours. Mark H. got his new Marantz. He was talking about this a couple of weeks ago, that his new Marantz Slimline NR1604 AV receiver. This is a receiver that's about just a little bit bigger than half as tall as a normal receiver. But they jam-packed it with all the right connections in the back, in my opinion. When I first saw these things, I was really impressed with what they had done. And after we assured him that it's the front, left, and right pre-outs, the only pre-outs it has other than the subwoofer output, would function just fine with surround sound and with the internal amplifiers of the receiver, driving the rest of the speakers. Everything is up and running and sounding fantastic. And even after an unfortunate meeting between the base of his TV and the top of his new AV receiver, while the AV receiver was sitting, how did that happen? The AV receiver was on the floor. Did you drop the TV on it?
No, yes, he had his AV receiver on the floor, and then he decided he needed to get behind his TV to reroute all the cables and everything that he had back there, so he picked up his TV, and he turned around, and he went to set the TV down on the floor, forgetting that the AV receiver was just placed in that same spot a few moments ago. So the two of them had a little clash.
Okay. Whatever. Okay. His one criticism, though, is that he thought Audyssey Dynamic EQ sounded awful. In his word, bloated bass, yuck. So he was not a fan of that and turned it off. Why on God's green earth would we recommend it? Well, Okay, so let's go. Let's just quickly review Odyssey dynamic EQ. I describe it this way. There's two ways. They have dynamic EQ and dynamic volume. And the dynamic EQ is keeping the say a flat frequency response or a flat sounding frequency response over different
Perceptually flat. Yeah.
perceptually during across different volumes. Whereas Dolby Volume is keeping an equal volume across time. So Dolby Volume lowers the volume whenever something really super loud happens for no reason, like a commercial, and also explosions, and it also bumps up volume if the volume's too low. I mean dialogue. The dialogue's too low. So there's all that going on. Dynamic EQ, on the other hand, as you change the volume, it changes the bass and the treble settings, the mid range, everything. It changes all the kind of the curve so that perceptually it sounds like the same volume to you. So when he turned this on, Mark H. turned this on, he experienced bloated bass. So why on God's green earth would we recommend this thing? Well, honestly, you should go ahead and thank Audyssey Dynamic EQ for showing you just how much you need room treatments, sir, or to place your subwoofer someplace else.
Yeah, possibly to do the subwoofer crawl.
So basically, what's happening here is dynamic EQ, as he's changing the volume, the bass is just sounding weird. Well, it's sounding weird because he's already got problems and bass problems in his room. This is not uncommon. We all start here, and some of us live in that world forever. We're never able to get out of the bass problem world. Okay, but what dynamic EQ is doing is basically exposing the bass problems you have in your room, because it knows that it's doing what it can to keep a flat frequency response. Perceptually a flat frequency response over that as you change the volume. If you're hearing something that's not flat, it's not Audyssey. It's your room. It's what's happening. It's what's happening between the time the speaker the sound leaves the speaker and gets to your ear.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you've been listening, what most people would consider normally, which is never having used dynamic EQ before, and almost no one is listening at full reference volume. Almost everybody is probably at least about 20 decibels quieter, even 5 or 10 dB is still pretty darn loud below reference volume there. So most people are absolutely not used to hearing all the bass that's actually in the signal because it's quieter, and we are really bad at hearing really low bass. There's these things called the equal loudness curves for human hearing, and in order for a low bass sound to sound equally loud as a mid-range sound, it has to be at least about 60 decibels loud, or we just don't hear it at all. So even if there's like a 40 decibel mid-range sound, which we can hear totally fine, if you also played a bass note at 40 decibels, so it's literally flat frequency response rather than perceptually flat, we wouldn't hear that bass note at all. So dynamic EQ is totally making that really low bass sound louder so that you can still hear it. If that sounds bloated and icky and disgusting to you, your bass sounds that way if you turn up the volume. It's just that all the other sounds would be so much louder, maybe they're covering that up and you don't notice it as much. So it's totally normal to notice that your bass does sound way louder and you're hearing things, but all it's doing is revealing what's there. So
yeah, it shouldn't though. I mean, when you turn it, if he turned it up to reference volume, that bass should sound. I mean, other than the fact that it would hurt his ears probably, and he wouldn't like it anyways. But if he turned it up to reference volume, the bass should still be bloated and weird. It's just everything else is going to be really loud too, but it's going to that's going to be if he could filter out how much pain he was in, it would still be it should sound the same. That's the theory behind it. So time to start asking us questions about room treatment, sir, or bass or subwoofer placement. So send us some pictures of your room. Let's talk about it. Did we already do that with him? I don't think we did.
I don't believe so.
I think he's just been talking about receivers. So this is good. This is great. This is good. This is just showing us that there's more work to be done, and we can help you out with that. John M. over at Facebook sent us an article about the iPhone. KenRockwell.com. I don't know who he is. Do I know who he is? Should I know who he is?
I don't know either. That's just the website. That's where it is.
Apparently, he's got some measurement equipment, and he measured the
Mhm.
not only the output, but kind of the quality of the output of his iPhone 5S. Now, the thing is, I have seen this article before. Or an article like it, and so maybe he's done this more than once, probably with every single iPhone that comes out. But he doesn't use his iPhone as a phone. He uses it mostly as a portable player and a camera. So he turns his phone onto like airplane mode, and most of the time because he doesn't need any of that, any other stuff because he's not using it as a phone anyways. That being said, when he's got it set in airplane mode, it measures really, really well. Not only does it play well with most headphones and even some harder to drive ones,
Mhm.
but the output is really, really clean. And so it's not just the DAC, which we already know is a pretty mature technology, but the headphone amps in the iPhone are pretty good as long as you take some precautions.
Yeah, it's this sort of flies in the face of the folks who say, "Oh, the iPhone is a horrible sounding device." I will agree that the little earbuds that they include with them, those are horrible sounding. So if you're judging it by that, I wouldn't blame anyone for saying that that sounds awful. But no, I mean this was very compelling evidence that the output, the analog output, the headphone jack of the iPhone 5 and the 5S, is a really clean signal. In fact, he's saying it's cleaner than a lot of stuff that is considered like audiophile analog equipment, just in terms of it being very linear, very low distortion, and having a pretty good, strong signal that's coming out of it that can drive almost any headphones that you might attach to it. So, yeah, I'm fairly convinced by the evidence that he's presenting there, and I do think it's really important to stress though that he is turning off the cellular radio and the Bluetooth radio because those can add interference, and he totally acknowledges that. So that might be where some people are hearing the noise. If they're hearing a little bit of a background noise, it's like, well, if you got your GSM radio on, yeah, that makes
Well,
sense.
if you're listening to portable DAC, people who are saying, "Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah, oh that's just it's 25-cent output." Like whatever, dude, shut up. Uh, I mean, my phones have mostly been fine, even with the Bluetooth and stuff on. I haven't really noticed that much because, frankly, I'm not using it as a high-end portable player, anyways.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, my phone doesn't have a ton of storage, and frankly, I'm not really interested in trying to get huge, uncompressed files onto it. I'd rather get a bunch of pictures of my kids and little movies of my kids. And what I'm taking around with me is stuff that's it's either not well recorded or fairly compressed. So I'm not so worried about that. I have other ways of taking music with me that's high quality without me having to worry about it on my phone. But if you are one of those people who has an iPhone 5, is it a 5S or just a 5?
I think it was actually just a 5
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Who are worried about the audio quality and think that you might need an external thingy. Well, he says you don't. All you have to do is use AirPlay
Yeah,
mode.
the one thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to Herb's question, but it should be noted he is talking about CD quality. This We're not high resolution audio files. The DAC inside of the iPhone, by all the accounts I've found, is limited to CD quality. So it's 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz. That's the internal DAC that's in there. So everything is going to be downsampled or have to be at that range. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the whole discussion of Nyquist frequencies and all that stuff coming up. So
Yeah.
look forward to that.
All right. So Leighton,
Mhm.
if you remember a while back, Leighton has a dedicated home theater. It's got a door that closes and everything. He's got room treatments all over the place, and he had tower speakers up front and two subs that were kind of flanking it. And my first reaction was like, I bet you could fit a sub at the back of that room. I bet you could squeeze it back there if you really tried. And you should put it back there and just try it anyway, see what it sounds like. Well, okay. So he agreed last week to give it a try to put the sub back there. He barely got it to fit, but it did get in there. He was really worried about it being so close to his seat because it was going to be like right behind the couch there, and the other one's going to be way at the front of the room. He didn't really think this was going to work. He thought he was just going to be too close to the subwoofer in the rear. I think it was the left corner for the sound any good. But basically, once he got them both set up and calibrated, what he heard he described as, quote, absolutely unreal. Okay, that unquote. The bass is now so much more even, not boomy at all like it used to be, and he can't tell where it's coming from. It just fills the room completely. Even one thing that he said that I think really bears repeating is when you're watching when you do this, and all of a sudden the bass actually seems quieter. You're like, there's not all this
Hmm.
boominess going on that you heard before. There's not all this bass kind of rumbling around for no reason. And then you're like, oh, okay, so now I have less bass, but I guess it sounds better, so that's cool. But now what's going to happen when I put a movie on? Well, you put a movie on, all of a sudden, when there needs to be bass, there's oodles of it, right? It just
Hmm.
comes tumbling out and shaking the room, and then afterwards, when there's not supposed to be bass, it goes away, and you're back to hearing what you're supposed to be hearing, and that's exactly what he described. It's exactly what he experienced, and it's all. I mean, basically, it's just proper placement of his subs. Yeah, he's got a lot of room treatments around there, and he did fiddle with those a little bit in order to fine tune it. But it didn't take much. Once you got those subs in the right place, it is just jaw-droppingly different for him. So congratulations, Leighton. We'll try not to break our arms patting ourselves on the back, but that's great. You should see
It
this
was a
sub.
very gratifying end result there. So
It
I'm very
is.
happy that he got to experience it. And all the stuff that we were saying, and like I was saying, it's literally difficult to believe because you look and you're like, there is a subwoofer right there. I can kick it. It's right beside my foot. There is no way this is going to work. And I don't blame anyone for thinking that. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, wow, this almost seems like magic. But it's not. It's just
Yeah.
acoustics. And it's very cool.
It is
Yeah.
very cool. I mean, literally, like if you're sitting on the arm at the end of one of his couch, you could put your drink on the sub. It is an
Oh,
end
yeah.
table. It is right there. There is no doubt about that. Uh, all right, so then we go to the questions and discussion topics from this
Oh,
week.
just
Now,
before we do,
yep.
Leighton did have one good, quick little question before he
Oh,
did
that's
put
right.
up that was worth repeating, which was he was just saying, all right, I've got these settings on the back of my subwoofers themselves for the crossover. Where should I be setting those things? And so what he actually had two different amplifiers, even though they're both SVS subs. It was between different model years when they changed the amplifier. So what you're looking to do when you are doing the bass management inside of your AV receiver, which almost all of us are if we have a surround sound receiver, you want to just bypass the crossover that's physically built into your subwoofer. That crossover control is only there if you happen to be using some sort of speaker setup that doesn't have bass management anywhere in it. So if you just want to bypass it, one of them, it was just a toggle switch that you could just say, disable the low pass filter. And the other one, you just turn the knob all the way up as high as it can possibly go. And it actually had it demarcated at the very top of the knob. It said disable. So if you don't do that, you end up with what's called cascading crossovers. The crossover is just a filter. So your AV receiver, if it has bass management, it's already filtering the bass. You do not want to filter it a second time inside of the subwoofer itself. You only want to filter it once. So that's why we disable it on the subs themselves. And it all worked out.
Yeah, if you don't have that disable switch, just turn it up as high as it'll go.
That's right.
I got like the first line into his question. I just immediately responded and said, I said turn all the way up. Oh, then you of course wrote your diatribe on it, and I
I
was
did.
like, oh, we're upset, but also just turn it all the way up. All right, so Joe. So Joe emailed me, and like I said, he had some questions about his. He's got a. It's not a new house, but they're doing a bunch of renovations, and having his main room, which is a great room. It's open to the rest of the house. It's got like I don't know, 10-foot ceilings. It's maybe 12-foot ceilings. It's big. The room is big. And it's a nice house, but they're going to customize it for themselves. And I guess he's been looking for a place for a really long time, so they finally found it. And the home theater was really, always going to be part of it. Not necessarily a true home theater, but surround sound, having a decent movie watching experience. So he was there. His wife was there. Thankfully, I got to talk to her as well. Basically, there's a lot of sort of things that he can only do based on the design committee, what the aesthetic committee will allow. So I was talking a lot to her, and we were trying to come up with ways of staying within this budget, which was not excessive. It was actually pretty modest considering what he wants to do, and also allow him the freedom to have a good system without, having massive speakers in this room. So she wants to have a complete built-in unit, nice, custom shelves, or I don't know if it's custom, but nice wall unit, and everything's going in there. He's actually got a closet behind his that's going to be behind this wall that where all of his AV gear is going to be right there.
Okay.
So he's going to put all his AV gear back there. He's going to be able to route the wires through there, and he'll have access to all of it. But so you won't see any of that. But he's going to have to put the speakers in on a shelf in this entertainment unit. And we were looking at surround speakers and where to put subwoofers and stuff like that. And subwoofers, of course, everything else was pretty easy to deal with. You got a cabinet installation, you're going to need front ported or non-ported speakers. So he started looking those up as soon as I left. We had talked a little bit about it. I said, pick your speakers so that you know what to tell. We know how big of a space you're going to need. Make sure that especially your center channel is going to have the right space. She was completely opposed to a drop screen or anything like that, so that was out. Had to be a direct view, had to be a normal TV, had to be sort of custom, not custom, but built in around it. I think 5-point was as big as they were going to go, even though it was a big space. But I found places to put their surrounds, and it's going to be pretty easy to get them up there without causing too much damage or strife. And she was okay with that as long as they were wall mounted. But the problem, of course, becomes the sub. In this case, subs, because it is a massive room. I can't even. It would easily. I mean, by the time you're filling up everything that's going to be open to it, it's going to be massive. One wall, of course, is all glass, so there's all that. And not only is it all glass, but there will not be curtains of any kind. So there's going to be that to deal with. But that being said, the subwoofers, I was like, okay, well, they can get. You're going to need something pretty big. Two of them pretty big. We talked about because he's only got his front wall. There's no place in the front at all to put a subwoofer. It's just it doesn't exist. You can't put it next to the window. That's out. The other side's got a door, so you can't put it. Basically, you'd be putting it in a hall if you did that. So what he told me was that he's going to have an L-shaped couch, and the L will define this walkway on the left. And then on the right side of the L, he can maybe put a subwoofer and use it as an end table. I'm like, well, Joe, if you're going to do that, make sure it's tall enough to be used as an end table. So get yourself a nice big one so that it can be used as an end table.
Shouldn't be a problem. Those most definitely exist.
Yeah. What I actually talked about in-wall subs, some of those older those Velodyne ones where they actually are meant to be. They're really tall and they have boxes and stuff. Those are possible, but they're kind of would suck up way too much of their budget. So what I actually suggested was, you've got this built-in entertainment cabinet thingy here. Take if your back right corner is going to have a subwoofer in it, put in your front left corner of this cabinet, just install SVS sub up there, the matching sub to go with it. See if you can get that to happen. It's not optimal. You don't want to put a sub in a cabinet like this. But if you make it so that it's sitting flush, not quite as bad. But in this case, I'm like, dude, you need ports. You need massive amounts of output.
Well, how about them cylinder subs?
Well,
anywhere to lay one behind the couch, perhaps? Or...
Yeah, the behind the couch is open to the kitchen, so it's not against a wall. So that space is defined as a home theater, and we're kind of talking about it that way, but really it's a corner of a humongous walk. I mean, it's just massive.
Well, maybe just get 5 really big subs and then put little cushions on top of them, and that becomes your seat.
You could do that.
Voila.
Or maybe you should just put a sub in each one of your spaces and just have it subs everywhere. What are these things everywhere? What are they? Are those water heaters? No, they're no.
Well, it was interesting because during this process, Tom forwarded me an email when they were trying to decide on some speakers that might be suitable for this application. It was kind of fun because went through a whole bunch of options, and a lot of them he's like, oh, these look really nice, but rear ported. These look really nice, but they're sealed and have limited output. Oh, these look really nice, but they're sealed and they don't play very low and might not cross over well to a sub, especially in a gigantic room where there isn't going to be enough room gain for limited bass output on speakers. So I was like, what about Kef? because I ended up going back to the same suggestion that I had before. When it was a similar situation, it's going to be a reflective room, needed speakers that could go inside a shelf, needed to be front ported, needed to have somewhat controlled directivity, but still sound good and still be efficient. So did that hold any sway? Was that
I don't
taken
know.
well,
I
the
haven't heard back
suggestion?
from him since then, but
Okay.
I'm sure we'll hear after this. But yeah, Kef kind of sits pretty well with me too,
Mm-hmm.
because of the the coaxial driver that's
Yeah.
on there. That situation is a little bit more, and I never was one really for those coaxial drivers until I actually reviewed a set of Kef speakers.
Right.
Then I was like, okay, now I'm hearing it. Now I get them because I heard it done poorly so many times.
Oh yes,
But
that is entirely possible.
Kef has done them. So, and plus you can get Kef on some of these bookshelves on accessories for less at least
Mm-hmm.
what 20% off, 40% off, something like that. Depends on which ones you go for, that sort of thing. So
Yep.
that'll be something we'll be keeping you in the loop of as he progresses, and then I'm sure we'll be talking about things. And we also talked about like some some absorption, the stuff with the pictures and that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and suggested that
Getting
to her.
printed acoustic panels so you can
The
have
printed
images on the
ones.
acoustic panels themselves. Yep.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, and I really tried to make sure that she understood that the whole point of having the two subs will make it much easier for you not to localize where the bass is coming from. They'll sound a
Mm-hmm.
lot better, a lot cleaner, they're just gonna rattle the hell out of those glass doors, though. I mean, it's gonna be brutal in there during Transformers,
Well, maybe you
whatever.
can get one of the newest Denon or Marantz AV receivers and see if that Audyssey LFC, their low frequency containment, find out if that thing actually works. Because I've never actually used it and heard it in person. I have no idea if it really
Doesn't
works
the
as well as
X4000 have
not.
that? It has it, right?
I
So
believe it does.
I will
Yeah.
be testing that as soon as I
There you
get my home
go.
theater back. My parents are painting I think tomorrow.
Hooray!
It's just
Progress is being made.
that's right. They have drywall to paint. That's about that. They don't have a floor or cabinets or countertops or appliances, but they have drywall to paint. So that's something.
Okay.
Hopefully get them out of my house eventually. All right, Michael R. He confirmed that he had. Okay, this is the guy who he had his tower set to large, and then he engaged the crossover with this subwoofers, and he tried it with the subwoofers on, the subwoofers off, and all that stuff, and never really heard a difference. We were surmising that perhaps his crossover was set too low. He confirmed that he had run Audyssey recently. They had sent his front towers to 40 hertz crossover. So that probably
Hmm.
explains why he wasn't hearing much, if any difference when switching between large and small in his speakers, because they were just basically always playing essentially large.
Yeah,
On the
he
last,
went he put his ear right up to his subwoofer, which is this little Polk subwoofer that he is not satisfied with, and he's like, yeah, it is definitely making sound. It's just not playing any lower than my towers, so it really isn't making a whole lot of
yeah.
difference in the bass I'm hearing. All makes sense.
So on the last episode, we mentioned that Aussie often does that, and if it does, a user should go to the setup menus and manually change the crossover frequencies and sizes of the speakers. Does not defeat the purpose of the automatic setup, and why run Odyssey in the first place if you just have to manually set up your speakers afterwards? Well, apparently you should have sent it to 0 dB before you started. Solve that whole problem. Apparently.
It's a free thing to try.
Shut up. Now, doesn't work.
What if it worked? What
Shut
if it
up.
worked?
It better not work. I need somebody
No,
to confirm that it doesn't work.
the
Somebody other
the
than me.
crossover. I've never had it set the crossover frequencies correctly, so that
Okay.
part doesn't work. But the
Well, as
trim,
Rob already mentioned, Michael, it's this part of it is not really Odyssey. It's really the speaker manufacturers that's doing this, and they're the ones that are screwing this part up. That being said, this volume levels are usually not an issue. Just crossovers can be. The volume or the trim and the distance is usually okay. It's usually the
Mhm.
crossover which you want to go ahead and change yourself. Now, why go through Odyssey? Well, because it's everything that the Odyssey does after that that's important. Making sure the crossover is where you want it to be is something that isn't that hard. It's everything else that Odyssey does. The room correction to help. No, they call it room correction. It really isn't. But the sound adjustments they do to try to give you as even a frequency response as possible is why you go through the hassle. If going through and making sure that your crossover setting is too much of is where you want it to be. If it's too much of a hassle, then I guess we could buy a mini DSP and do it all manually. Uh,
No, I mean, I'm glad he asked this because, I mean, a lot of people listening to this podcast, we've all just gotten used to the idea. We're like, oh yeah, whenever you run one of these automatic setup programs, you always have to go in and manually tweak the settings afterwards, and we just sort of take it for granted that that's the way it is. And it's good to be reminded sometimes. It's like, oh, that really doesn't make any sense. I mean, the whole thing is saying run the automatic setup. It will adjust the settings for you and get them correct, and then you can be on your merry way. And it's all of us are like, oh no, of course you have to change the settings afterwards manually. And that isn't fair to assume that everyone's going to think that. So I'm happy
I
for that
would, you know what
reminder.
I would love them to do with these automatic setups?
Mm-hmm.
I love every single one to say. Uh, Experts agree that setting your crossover for all your speakers to 80 hertz
Mm-hmm.
is optimal for home theater and music. Would you like us to do that, or would you like to set them yourself? And
Yeah,
then
or
just
or that should be like the lowest it ever sets it automatically, and it will only adjust the crossover frequency if it detects that your speakers can't play down to 80 hertz. Because of
then it
course there
goes
are
up.
some,
It's 80
yeah,
or up.
yeah,
Yeah,
80 or up. Yeah, if that
they're
were the
never doing
default,
that.
instead of, oh, they always seem to try to set it as low as they possibly can.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's
No, that's
unfortunate, but that it sort of just
I
is
know
what it
exactly
is.
why it is because somebody's gonna be peeved that
That's
they
right.
spot full range speakers and
That's right.
full range and they're like, I want to set my crossover at 65. I'm like, stupid. Okay, he also found a two-page article from Sam Vision on base management. He thought it was very interesting and informative, and thought we might like to discuss it and share it with the AV Rant community. In particular, it specifically talks about that tricky LPF for LFE, or low pass filter for low frequency effects channel setting. The article suggests that setting to 80 rather than 120 in the 120 hertz default, so that the subwoofer will always remain non-localizable. Do you have any thoughts on that? What's the 120 default? Who 120 defaults? Is that a thing
That
that still
that is
happens?
always, yeah. I mean, this, okay. So just to explain it a little bit, this is not the crossover. We're not talking about the crossover here. The crossover, we agree, set that to 80 hertz.
Right.
You know, your subwoofer should be getting quieter and quieter above 80 hertz. All of your speakers should be getting quieter and quieter below 80 hertz, and they should cross over and merge together and all sound like one uniform speaker. That's the idea. But there is this separate setting that is just the low pass filter for just the low frequency effects channel. That is the 0.1 in your 5.1. And that is a separate independent channel. And as is mentioned in this article, which is a good thing that's mentioned, the LFE channel is not the subwoofer channel. And I like that he mentioned that. It isn't just meant for the subwoofer, it is the low frequency effects channel. It could theoretically be played by any speaker in your system. They just set that aside because low bass sounds need it, you have to have the capability of making them even louder than all the other sounds. We say that reference volume has peaks as loud as 105 decibels in the speakers, but those peaks can be as loud as 115 decibels in the low frequency effects channel. So they set that aside so that they can have that extra 10 decibels of headroom. So you have this separate channel that's in there, and you want to have a low pass filter on that so that it isn't playing particularly high. Now, for whatever reason, the industry has just decided that 120 hertz is the default for that low pass filter, and he's suggesting set that to 80 because above 80 it might start to become localizable. The only reason that is literally that's the only thing in the article that I would even quibble with. I really like this article. I will definitely post up the links. It's worth reading if you're at all curious about base management, because he goes into detail in the history of it and everything, and I totally agree with everything in there. The only reason I'd suggest maybe leaving it at the default is because, again, the whole idea of that low frequency effects channel isn't to just put it out of your subwoofer, it's to have additional headroom. So let's just say there's an 85 or a 90 or a 100 hertz sound. I mean, that it's getting on the edge of maybe being localizable, but it's pretty unlikely that it will be. And the idea is if some sound mixer or some sound masterer went into their soundtrack and said, I want that particular sound to be 10 decibels louder than all the other sounds for whatever reason, if you just leave it at the default, then that's still there and you're hearing what they intended for you to hear. So that's the only thing I might quibble with, but otherwise I really like this article.
Okay.
Tom?
Yep. Yeah. It is important. That was the thing that struck me too, because I kind of flipped through it pretty quickly, and I didn't really find anything wrong was wrong with it either. Uh, especially like some of the a little bit. There was a couple times where the verbiage was a little bit unclear. I mean,
Hmm.
that I understood it, but I think other people may be confused by it. But generally speaking, I thought that was pretty well done. So, and then now he's not contradicting anything we say, which means it must be
No.
okay. So there you go.
Yeah, that was nice to see that all the things we're always saying. He's saying always set all your speakers to small, always give them a crossover, even if they're technically capable of playing the bass, they're not in the correct location. He talks about the room interaction and all those things. Mentions, 4 subwoofers, one at the midpoint of each wall is pretty much the ideal setup if you can do it. So
Right.
all the things we've been mentioning, they're all repeated in that article. So we're all in agreement there.
Yes. All right. Michael's also considering upgrading his center and surrounds the same brand and series as his towers. His towers
Hmm.
are PSB Image T5s. The Image C5 center seems like an obvious choice for the center, but he's wondering if he should go with the B5 bookshelf speakers or the bipole S5 speakers as his surrounds. The S5 are more expensive. They're probably wall mountable, right?
Oh
Uh,
yes, yeah, they have that sort of rounded, almost look like a sconce type
Oh,
of
okay. They're
design.
not one of those
So,
trapezoidal looking things then.
well, I mean, technically they are, but the way the grills go on, they end up looking curved
Okay. And that's a
around.
bipole speaker. So the
Yeah.
S5 is a bipole on wall and the B5 is going to be a bookshelf.
Mhm.
So, which do you suggest?
I say it just depends on where you want to place them. Because if you want to hang them on the wall, those S5s are going to be a heck of a lot more convenient. They come with the wall mount bracket, they sit flush on your wall, and they look like a nice, attractive sconce. Whereas the bookshelf speakers are rear ported, and you'd have to use, a particular speaker wall mount to put it on there, give them a little bit of distance between the back of them and the wall, because you don't want to block the output of that port. So might not be as attractive, would take up more space. Or if you want to have them on stands, then the bookshelves are definitely going to be easier to use than the bipole ones that aren't really designed to go on stands. The bipoles are meant to go on the wall. So I would entirely choose it based on where you're going to place them.
Yeah. Uh, I and I think 3 months ago I would have said, "Oh yeah, go with the bipoles for sure." So, and my only caveat would have been, well, unless you're mostly going to use it for surround sound music, then
Mm-hmm.
maybe the bookshelves would be better. But if you're going to be using them mostly for movies, then the bipole is going to be better, and you should go ahead and go with those. That being said, that's what I would have said. Now, with what we're seeing now with Dolby Atmos and what's probably going to happen with DTS UHD, uh, we're seeing that surrounds are being moved from where we've always had them, 2 or 3 feet above your ear and a little bit back for your surrounds, and then behind you for the surround backs, but also high up. We are now seeing that they're going, oh yeah, we were just kidding about that. We want them to be at ear level. So if you think that you in the future you might be thinking about doing something more Atmos E or UHD or something like that, you probably want to have the bookshelf speakers.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of my thought. That being said, you're going to be fine with either one. It's really not going to make a difference. Where do you want to put them? I think it's going to be the most important thing. If it doesn't really matter to you either way, I would lean towards the bookshelf. It's
Hmm.
if it were for this whole Dolby Atmos thing, a bookshelf. If at some point in the future you're like, I want to get rid of all this crap. I'm going to get to. I heard these new surround sounds, these new tower speakers that I really love, and I'm going to get those. But now I'm stuck with all these PSB speakers. You take the bookshelves and do something with them. The surround on walls, you're like, and now I got to sell these because you can't do anything with them after that. So they're more
Yeah.
versatile as bookshelves.
Just to show that it's possible that a man can change. I mean, I was a strong advocate of diffuse surround speakers for a long, long time. And I mean, I still do like bipoles because essentially they're just a really extremely wide dispersion speaker.
Yeah.
That's more or less all they do. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely come much more around to the idea of just using regular direct firing monopole speakers in the surround positions, not just because of Atmos, but because we are getting much more discrete sound in our soundtracks now that is much more the common thing. People just in general tend to like it when they can sort of notice their surround speakers more rather than them being subtle and just sort of being ambient. So I've come around to the idea of monopole speakers, and yeah, to me the placement sort of settles it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Jonathan F. He got a promotion from his Sonos and their wireless subwoofer. God, promotion. What does that mean?
An advertisement.
Oh. What? Is
A
that a
promo,
Canadian thing?
What? No, like a promo.
Well, a promo is. I understand, but I've
A
never
promotion.
heard anybody call it a
That's,
promotion.
that's what promo stand. That's what it's short
I'm
for.
sure it does, but I've never heard anybody say it like that. Promotion is something you get when you're like going to get a raise. You get promoted.
Yeah. Oh, I know. But yeah, no, it's also like a deal, right?
Ad,
Yeah,
deal,
an ad. Yeah.
flyer, promotion.
Okay,
I've
bridge.
read this email so many times. Every time I get to that, I got like a speed bump. Promotion. All right, I guess whatever. Fine. He got an ad from Sonos about their wireless subwoofer. He noticed it has dual drivers that face each other and
Mm-hmm.
fire inward. So basically, it's an O.
Yeah.
Okay, and on the sides of the inside of the O, facing each other are two woofers that are firing towards each other. Okay. But it also has an amplifier for each one of these woofers. Jonathan
Mm-hmm.
is just wondering if we've ever seen this sort of subwoofer design before and why Sonos would have chosen this particular design. Honestly, Sonos always, I mean, their speakers are usually fine. I usually have no problems with them. From the stuff I've heard, I've been like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. I would bet that they came up with this design because it looked cool, and then they're like, now where are we going to put the speakers in it? That'd be my guess. Maybe not. Maybe somebody really wanted to make a subwoofer that had two drivers facing each other and whatever. Generally, when you see this sort of design, the drivers are facing out,
Yeah.
and the magnets are, are in, and the drivers are wired in phase. They're both firing in the same direction at the same time, and you get an increase in output. The phase is not an issue with the sub, because remember, it wraps around anyways, right? The phase is not an issue, and if your sub is prone to be jumping around because they get this big driver, the sub's firing in phase back and forth keeps the sub from bouncing. I don't know if that's really going to be an issue with the Sonos thing. I think it's just they're just looking for more cone area. They're looking for a higher output, and they're looking for cool design, and this is what they came up with. I don't think there's any reason sonically that it did that. It's
Yeah, I mean this is by no means a dual subwoofer. That's not what we're talking about. I mean it's just a subwoofer that happens to have two drivers. I was looking. The one it reminded me of is Paradigm has a subwoofer in their Millennium series, so they have their Millennia sub, which is sort of a similar looking thing, but it has both of its subwoofer drivers. Both are active and they're facing outwards, so firing out from each other instead of in at each other. But that one only has the one amplifier. So that's really the sort of unique thing I haven't really seen before, is having two separate amplifiers, one for each of these drivers. We were trying to speculate what it is. I mean, Sonos does mention directly in their literature that they use DSP processing to try and reduce any distortion and try and get the absolute most output out of these small drivers, which they are pretty small drivers, that they can. I was speculating, all right, they probably built some of that DSP, the waveform shaping and distortion protection and clipping protection and all that kind of stuff. They probably built that into the amplifier. Maybe it was just easier to have one amp, one driver there. We don't have to worry about connecting two drivers to a single amp or something like that. Tom had one other idea, though, just based on the design, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could very well be that they're just using these small, like, I mean, Bang& Olufsen, their little amp modules. I mean, they basically in their speakers, they almost attach them to the actual driver. So it could very well be there. It's like, look, having one big amp to power both of them physically would not have fit on the sub on the sub the way they wanted, and they had two small amps that they could just place exactly where they needed them to be, because it's a funky looking sub, so it could just be
Yeah.
a space issue. But that's my guess. My guess is a space issue slash what they have access to. And saying we have Class D amplification. Yeah, so does everybody else. That's not a big deal. That's what they all have.
Class D amplifiers and subwoofers are
It's
pretty darn common.
it's like saying a car has an engine. We've got an engine too. Yeah? Good. Well, I hope so. It's not a freaking car. I don't know what it is. So, lame.
All right.
Anyways, I'm sure it's fantastic sounding. Whatever. Lame. Herb from Cross Spectrum Labs. Cross Spectrum Labs is the wonderful place you can go and buy calibrated microphones. What he does is he buys the microphone, he measures it, and compares it to a professionally calibrated mic that has a known, is known to be absolutely linear in its recording ability. And he tests that. He records something with that mic, and then records the same thing with the mic that he just bought, and says, "Okay, well, it's inaccurate in these ways. Here's a correction file," and then he sells you the mic with a disc that has a correction file on it, so that when you put it into your computer to do measurements, that you have the correction file right there. Then you're measuring just as linearly as his amplifier, provided, I mean, as his microphone, his professional microphone, provided you haven't dropped the mic, which you probably did, but you shouldn't, because then it won't be. Anyway, so last week, Rob mentioned in passing that the highest frequency represented by a digital audio recording is exactly half the sampling rate. That frequency is called a Nyquist frequency, and Rob mentioned that can only be a perfect sine wave. Herb heard that and spit coffee all over his monitor, or maybe scotch. I don't remember what he did, and he typed off a furious email to Rob. Very angry. And what did he say, Rob?
So he was saying that this is going to the Nyquist theorem itself, the actual theorem of doing digital sampling. And so the whole idea is that we're starting with a band-limited signal, which just means we're limiting what frequencies we're considering here. So this isn't just all the frequencies that could possibly exist. We're setting our parameters. We're going from this frequency at the bottom to this frequency at the top. So it's band limited in that way. And we're talking about a continuous, a regular analog signal that's out in the world, and it's being sampled and turned into digital audio, and then we're recreating the original wave from those samples. So the whole Nyquist theorem is saying that as long as the highest frequency that we're dealing with in this band-limited signal is half of the sampling rate, so the Nyquist rate is at least double whatever the highest frequency is, as long as we're within those parameters, we can perfectly reconstruct the wave, regardless of what the shape of the wave is. The wave doesn't have to be sine waves. The wave could be sawtooth waves, square waves, whatever it is. We can perfectly reconstruct any wave as long as we're staying within this band-limited signal. So what I was saying about the very, very highest frequency, where we're only using 2 data points to represent that wave, I mean, that does end up being a sine wave for that. So I'm not 100% wrong in what I said, but the whole idea is that I had a very common misconception. And what happened was him asking me this sent me down the rabbit hole, because I'm like, all right, I need to figure this out, and I'm going to go searching around, and I'm going to try and understand this stuff a little bit better. And I found a great site with a great explanation. We will post the link. The website is ziph.org. That's Ziph with an X, so it's xiph.org, where there are engineers, and they are writing articles and really getting into stuff, but in a way that's quite understandable if you're, not just looking at mathematical formulas or something like that. And they also posted a video because some people were asking about particular parts of the explanation in the text, and he's like, all right, this is easier to show in a video. So there's a great video there as well demonstrating what's going on. So the misconception that I had, and they talk about this specifically in the article because it's such a common misconception, is the idea that if you had more data points, you could better represent the original wave. Mm-hmm. Which intuitively seems to make sense, right? We're saying, all right, we're taking a continuous analog wave, we're turning it into individual dots of data, and then we're playing connect the dots, sort of, and redrawing the wave. So doesn't it make intuitive sense, and it does, that if you had more data points, you could better represent that wave? So the whole point of the Nyquist theorem is that, no, you don't need. Having more data points wouldn't give you a smoother representation of the wave when you recreate it, because when they're first doing the sampling and you end up with these data points, the thing that he really showed well in the video is that you do not get a stair-step signal. And we see that all the time when people are explaining how digital audio works. They show you the digital wave version as being a stair-step wave, right? It goes up.
It looks like something Atari 2600 would
That's
render.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It looks like a you zoomed way in Photoshop or something, and you're just seeing, the
Yeah.
square pixel things,
Yeah.
which he also explains that isn't correct either. They aren't squares. But, that aside, he's explaining, no, it shouldn't be a stair-step wave. That's not the correct way to show it. It should be a lollipop graph. It should be, those samples exist only in the infinitesimally small amount of time when the sample was taken, and they don't represent a flat line that continues over to the next sample. That's where they exist, that one dot, and that's it. So when you're redrawing the continuous wave, when you're doing your digital to analog conversion, there is only one mathematical function that will create a line that goes through all of those data points. We're not just looking at a stair-step wave and approximating the line and drawing it by hand. No, you were coming up with a mathematical formula that will create a line that goes through all those data points. And there is only one that will do that. It's a unique formula for those data points, and so you get a perfect inverse. So whatever you sampled, you get the perfect output going back. And that was really cool. I totally learned something there that I consider really, really valuable. And he goes into the whole explanation of, we've had this whole debate about high resolution audio and do we need higher sampling rates and do we need higher bit depths. So I really like the explanation. A lot of the stuff that we've been saying in the past holds true in the recording phase. He's saying there's totally value in using a 96 kilohertz sampling rate during the recording phase, the actual, taking the analog and putting it into a microphone and then representing it. But the reason is because we're dealing with a band-limited signal. We're dealing with a signal that can only go up to a certain high frequency. So if we're going to represent it correctly during the recording phase, we have to cut off the frequencies above whatever our sampling rate is, which, in real life, there are ultrasonic frequencies, right? We're not hearing them in our ears, and he explains why we can't hear them really well and really detailed and makes an extremely convincing case, which I 100% believe. But, it's saying there are these ultrasonic frequencies. If we don't filter those out during the recording, they end up creating distortions in the recording because the samples aren't coming fast enough to capture what's there in real life. So capturing at 96 makes sense, but playing back, we don't need them because once it's digital, we can apply the filter on the top end and get rid of them, and we could bring it down to 48 kilohertz or 44.1 kilohertz or 40 kilohertz. It would be totally fine. On the playback side, what I really liked is what it amounts to saying is the reason we have discrepancies between CD quality versions and high resolution versions and stuff is that it pretty much all comes down to human error, which 100% makes sense because
what we've been saying forever.
Yeah, there's no problem with using 24-bit audio. It just takes up more space than we actually need. But errors can be made when you're using 16-bit audio that could result in small distortions or little bits of noise. If it's done properly, they won't. Mathematically, it doesn't have to be that way. But humans can make errors. So if we just use 24-bit, we pretty much don't have to set any limits or filters on that side of it, and therefore it gets rid of that problem. If we record at 96 kilohertz, we don't have to worry about, setting a correct low-pass filter for the high frequencies and that. So the case is well made, and it's totally worth reading and watching that video, and we'll link to that.
We'll link that up on Facebook and stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Thang you to Herb. Thank you.
Thank you, Herb.
Very valuable.
Tell Rob he's wrong more often. Also tell Rob that podcast can be an hour. Mike G.
Not this one.
Not this one. Installed the karaoke app for XMBC. No, XBMC.
Which we don't have to worry about anymore because it's not called that anymore.
Yeah,
it's now called Kodi. Kodi. Kodi.
Yeah. Wow, that's not stupid at all. Kodi does not support, of course. When you told me that other podcast was all about Microsoft products, I was just thinking to myself, is it just an hour of them banging their heads against the wall? Because it feels like that's what every time I open up my
maybe that's why they didn't invite Tom onto the podcast and they invited me instead. It'd just be Tom sitting there snarking on everything Microsoft.
That's all I do. I snark. Anyways, the new Kodi does not support USB microphones, so Mike is wondering if there's some way that he can connect his microphone directly to his Yamaha RXV 1900 AV receiver while simultaneously hearing the music coming from his Kodi HTPC, which is connected to his Yamaha via HDMI. He has all the necessary cables and adapters to connect his microphone to his AV receiver, and it works just fine, but only by itself. Does he have to use a second zone? Yeah, I think kind of. I was thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
You can watch video and change, like most receivers, you can watch video and change the source of the audio. So if you wanted to watch like a movie, like if it was like some sort of film that was all about that just had like beautiful pictures in it or something like that, and then wanted some background music to go with it, you could switch your audio to something else. I don't know. I haven't done that in forever since I think I've had HDMI. I don't think I've done that, but I don't think that you could, because he wants to be able to have the microphone go through the receiver and the music coming from the HTPC at the same time.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
and
I don't.
That is not going to work.
That's not. I don't know any way that can happen at
No,
all.
not in that connection path. Yeah, I mean AV receivers, they can only play in the main zone one audio device at a time. That they have no way of mixing together two separate audio sources and playing them both back simultaneously in the main zone. So I mean the solution here would be to connect another pair of speakers to your zone 2 output, and then you could have, say, your microphone going to zone 2, and it
You
will
just buy a
come,
mixer.
that will come. Yeah,
You could buy a mixer,
that
have
would
it
be
go
the other
between
way.
your HTPC and your receiver, and have it analog out from your HTPC into the mixer,
Mm-hmm.
and then your microphone into the mixer, and have that output out to your receiver. You can do it that way.
Yeah.
And mixers are cheap, $100, less than that for some of them. Look for podcasting equipment, because those guys are all about the cheap stuff.
Yeah, that is absolutely the way to do this. And the thing is, it's not as though you would have to. Well, let's think about this, because he still wants to have the video from the Kodi HTPC as well, because he wants to be able to see the lyrics on his TV screen, right?
But if the audio out is going through is the HTPC connected by HDMI?
It is, but see, now here's what we could do, right? He could have his HTPC connected via HDMI to his AV receiver, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be his normal playback method for most things.
Yeah.
When he wants to do karaoke, what he could do is set that as his video source.
Yep.
Right? So that's going to be his video. That's fine. And then he would have an analog audio output going from his HTPC and the analog audio output from his microphone, both going into a separate analog mixer. And then the analog mixer would be sending an analog signal into, say, the CD input of his AV receiver. And then he could say the video source is still the HDMI from the HTPC, but the audio source is now the analog CD input. That will work, but you will have to buy an outboard mixer. That's going to be the only way to do it if you don't want to use Zone 2 for some reason. And, well, you'd need a separate...
I bet dollars to donuts. You use Zone 2 for some reason, you're going to end up with syncing issues. I'm almost.
Yes, that could be.
I tell you what, you would go through all the hassle of buying yourself an amp or something like that, or even if you did it within the receiver, I bet dollars to donuts you're going to end up with syncing issues. And your mic's going to come out just a little. Your mic's come out a little bit after or a little bit before. I'd get the mixer.
The other way to do it would be to find some way of adapting your USB microphone to just a regular analog line in and plugging that into your HTPC. Because apparently, it can probably take a line in analog signal just for whatever reason.
Yeah, but usually if it's a USB mic, it would need phantom power anyways.
Right.
So we may be running into that anyways. We might have to buy a new mic too. I don't know, dude.
Yell at the Kodi development people who made the karaoke app and say support USB microphones, you dummies, and just keep yelling at them until they do.
That usually works. I don't think it's that hard. Infinite Gary. Okay, he's heard us mention of fully assignable pre-outs being a possibility on some future. Did we mention that? I don't remember.
No, he's heard of, not us.
Oh, not us. Oh, good, because I don't remember mentioning that, and I don't think I've lost that many brain cells lately. At least. He's heard us mention of fully assignable pre-outs being a possibility of some future Dolby Atmos capable receivers. What does that mean, and why would you want them? All right, so normally with pre-outs, those are those RCA usually. On higher end processors, they'll also be XLR, but RCA connections that go from your receiver to your amplifier. to an external amplifier. Uh, Fully assignable means exactly what it means, what it sounds like. It doesn't say it's not going to be one for front left, one for front right, one for surround your center or whatever. They're going to be assignable, meaning you could say, okay, this one is going to go to my center channel. This one's going to go to a height 1, or height, or top left, bottom right.
We're going to get into that in a second.
Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You know what I mean? So that way you get the maximum possible flexibility. Why would you want this? Why wouldn't you want this? Because you don't. It gives you the most control over what you. This is what I like when you see a receiver that has extra speaker level connections. So they have 9 amps or 7 amps, but they have 9 or 11 or 13 pairs of speaker connections. Why is that a good thing? Well, it's good because you can now take and you have all your amps driving all your speakers in your home theater. Say it's a 7-channel amp. You've got actually 9 speaker levels, right? Speaker connections. Well, most of the time you're running the home theater, right? You got all 7 channels running the speakers in the home theater. But every once in a while, you want to take what's normally the surround backs, and you want those to power a zone 2. And that zone 2, say it powers speakers outside. Okay? Wow. Now you connect those speakers, those outside speakers, to those extra 2 ones, and then you can go into your settings, and you can do this a number of ways. If you've got a programmable remote, it's really easy. Sometimes you can do it through the actual the AVR interface, or if you have something like a Harmony, well, then you just program yourself a nice little macro, and it does it itself. But basically what it does is it takes those speaker channels and it says, okay, we're no longer powering surround backs, we're now powering zone 2. And that's how that works. So that's why you would want something like that, so that you have that sort of flexibility to say, okay, well, I've got all these assignable outputs. Sometimes I'm going to want to have Dolby Atmos 11.2 point stupid, and then sometimes I'm going to want to have 7.2 point, and then all 7 extra speakers in my house powered for whole house audio. So that's why.
Yep. Yeah, it's also going to be useful because, as we're about to describe, there are now a whole bunch of new speaker position names. Hooray! Because we didn't have enough before, Tom. We didn't have enough with only 11.
I'm already tongue-tied.
13.
Ugh.
Yeah, no, we didn't. Not enough. We didn't have enough little, 2 or 3 letter acronyms for speaker positions. All using the same letters in jumbled up different forms.
Seriously, if you're listening to this podcast right now and you're anywhere near a piece of paper, you're going to want to start. You're going to you need a pencil and a piece of paper, because we're going to start talking about speakers. I'm going to start stumbling all over them. Rob may or may not. Who knows?
So yeah, the one way to come at how to assign what preamp or what speaker is active during what listening mode, the one way is to do what they're doing right now. We're going to talk about this just in a second, which is basically multiple choice. Here are your choices of the various combinations that it can be. Select the one you would like to use. That's one way of doing it. The other one is to just say, here are the speakers I have. These are the outputs I want you to output them from. That would be fully assignable, and to me, that's easier than going through a multiple choice list, which is highly confusing, and let's talk about that right now.
All right, so Gary kindly forwarded a link to Onkyo's Dolby Atmos capable Pre-Pro, the PR. Onkyo's got a Pre-Pro?
They do.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyways.
Not after you see.
PRSC. Yeah, well, I mean, they haven't had one in a really long time. They usually just let people buy the Integra one. Yeah, so it's a PRSC 5530. The manual goes into some detail about exactly how Onkyo is handling Atmos in the first generation. It also makes clear how your speakers are supposed to be positioned. Link, which we will put someplace.
Yep.
Not to be outdone, Denon Europe has posted the manuals for the Dolby Atmos capable receivers and the AVRX 5200. And their speaker locations are even more detailed. And by going by these 2 manuals, it's clear that different manufacturers will indeed be offering varying levels of flexibility in terms of which speaker positions you can use for Atmos playback. On top of that, Pioneer has posted the manuals for their Pioneer Elite branded Dolby Atmos enabled receivers. Their receivers include pretty strict and detailed
No, these are
descriptions.
the speakers. The receivers, the manuals haven't come out yet. These are for their speakers. They put up the
Oh, for the
manuals.
speakers. I'm
I'm
sorry.
sure the manuals for the receivers are coming very
Oh,
shortly.
yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm reading that very far away. The manuals include pretty strict and detailed descriptions of where speakers need to be placed in order for those upward-facing drivers to work properly. I place them in the garbage, but you can place them wherever you like. So let's
So,
go through this.
yeah.
Basically, uh, okay. So there are more top speakers than we thought there were. We were kind of told by Dolby that there were going to be top, we'll call them top
Hmm.
front left and top front right, and
Okay.
top back left and top back right. Okay, those were those four speaker positions that we keep seeing in all the
Yeah.
diagrams from Dolby. Okay, they're right, kind of in line with your main speakers,
Hmm.
and a little bit forward for the top left and right fronts, and in line with your surround back speakers, which no one ever put there, or surround speakers, kind of in line with you, with your couch or whatever, and then or with those front speakers as well, but up above or in front of your rear speakers. Those are the top back left and top back right. What they did not tell us is that there's also top middle left and top middle right, and those are supposed to be right over your head,
Hmm.
but over to the sides. Okay,
Hmm.
they didn't tell us that. They also didn't tell us that they're at some point are going to start supporting, or some of them are going to start supporting front left high and front right high.
Uh-huh.
Those are going to be up near the ceiling and pointed down towards you, directly above your main speakers, but on the front wall,
Hmm.
up in the
On the
corner,
front wall, not on the ceiling, on the front wall.
on the front wall, face yeah, and then there's going to be back rear heights.
Yes.
Wait, let's shoot. Can't be back rear. Back left highs and back right highs as well. But in line with your front speakers, all the way at the back of the room, on your wall, up in the corner, facing down towards where you're sitting. So that's 10.
10. Yeah.
That's how you get to 10.
When they talked about the maximum being 10 overhead speakers, now we know that those it's not just like 10 speakers above you willy-nilly. No, this is precisely 2 rows of 5. Those rows are exactly in line with where your front left and right main speakers are. So just go straight up from those and draw 2 parallel lines on your ceiling. That's the distance from left to right that they're supposed to be apart. And then these are the 5 positions. It is front heights, top fronts, top middles, top rears, and rear heights. And that makes the arc above you. So to me, this so okay, here's the thing I want to say first. Last week, I was trying to be sort of rosy about Atmos, not quite as down on it as Tom is. I am officially now
Once
going, this is
again,
dumb.
I was right. You were
This
wrong. It's
this is
me.
now dumb
This is
because
dumb. This is so dumb.
I am definitely going to be taking a little picture of the speaker layout that I particularly like the one that's in the Denon manual because it is the most ridiculous thing you have ever seen because they're showing all the okay, like all of these ones can only run 11 speakers simultaneously. That is the most speakers that can be driven simultaneously by these things, but they're showing all the possible speaker positions all at once in one room. And if people thought my room already looks ridiculous, like this is a whole other level and it's hilarious. But they have just defined new speaker positions and given them names. It is not just good enough to have things on your ceiling. No, no, they must be in specific spots on your ceiling and they are given a name so you can identify them in your AV receiver's menu and it will know, the Dolby Atmos renderer will know how to steer the sounds. So, yeah, this is the farthest thing from the whole idea of speaker mapping. This is the polar opposite of speaker mapping.
This
We've
is
just
just more
laid out
discrete channels, is all it is.
more discrete positions. And yes, I am now in full agreement that this is horrible and dumb because no one is going to understand and no one is going to be able to, no one's going to be able to do this. This
No
just,
one's doing this. I was at Joe's house. I'm like, this is a new, basically you're gutting this room anyways. Are you thinking about putting Atmos speakers up there? He goes, you think I should? I said, no.
Okay, so the one thing I'm happy about, the one thing I'm happy about is that because I'm an insane person, and even though I just said it's dumb and no one's going to do it, I'm going to try because it's me. And the one thing I'm happy about is I cannot put speakers on my ceiling. That's not going to happen. I cannot put them in or attach them to my ceiling. I have acoustically treated my ceiling, so I can't use the Dolby Atmos enabled bouncy off the ceiling speakers. I can put up front heights. I already like my front wides. Those positions are supported, and you can use you can have your height one output being front heights, exactly where mine already are. So I'm good to go there. I have no idea how I would ever get rear heights in there, but that might be my only possibility for having height channels
Your
behind me,
rear
and
channels are
that can be
already
done.
raised, though, right?
Oh yeah, my surround
So it's
backs are already
pointless.
elevated. I
It's
know.
pointless. You
Well,
can't put
these
you
these
can't
are
put
quite a bit
anything back.
higher. Yeah. So anyway, the fun part is we'll post links to these manuals if you would like to dig through them and try to make sense of them because they are hilarious. But what was so awesome in how awful it is that you're looking at Onkyo's menus and how to set this up, and like I said, it ends up being multiple choice. So they're saying, all right, we have 13, no, more than 13 possible speaker positions, but we're including the front wides and two elevated positions, whether those be heights or tops. And so they give you a series of potential setups if you're using four expanded speakers beyond the seven we're already normally used to. So they're like, okay, you can start with your first pair is front heights. If you make them front heights, then the other pair could be wides, they could be top middles, they could be rear heights, they could be Dolby enabled speakers in either the surround or the surround back positions. So if you use your first pair as front heights, you're pretty good to go. Almost anything else you can do. But for some reason, if you say your first pair of expanded speakers are the top front speakers, meaning they're actually on your ceiling, all of a sudden the only thing the other set of speakers can be are top rears. They can't be anything else in this particular way that Onkyo has set it up. It's like extremely limiting. If you say that your first pair of expanded speakers are the top middle speakers directly above you, it won't output anything from the other set of expansion speakers. Like, that's just the way they've set it up. It makes no sense that they're being this limiting. I don't get it. Do you get it, Tom?
Yeah, I know many engineers, and it's like, well, why wouldn't you say these first and just work your way back? So yeah,
Yeah, like why can't I have, say, top front speakers on my ceiling and rear height speakers? Right? Like, why? Why can I not do that? The only ones I can have are top rears. That's it. That's the only thing. So, in contrast to
they'll
that,
fix it in
you look.
firmware.
Exactly. Yes, there are these firmware updates. So hopefully, in contrast to that, we have the Denon manual. They have it different. I mean, theirs is pretty much as flexible as it can possibly be. I mean, it just goes, all right, the first ones, you know, front heights, front wides, top fronts, top middles, whatever you want them to be. Dolby Atmos enabled front speakers, Dolby Atmos enabled surround speakers, whatever you want that front one to be, and then whatever you want the second ones to be, as long as they're behind the front ones. Yeah, the second ones, so if your first ones are top fronts, then the second ones have to be top middles or top rears or rear heights or front wides.
Right.
So it's totally flexible, but they have one of the most confusing things I've ever seen, which is if you want to use the ceiling bouncy speakers, the Dolby Atmos enabled speakers, you have to say Dolby Atmos enabled speakers. That's like a separate tick box that you have to check, and then it can be like any combination of actual overhead speakers and bouncy reflective speakers, and it's like it's very unintuitive how to set it up.
I wonder if you could bounce a
Yeah.
speaker off of an actual speaker. You could just put a speaker
Put
up
a
there
physical
and
speaker
bounce it.
and bounce it.
I really want
That might be a
I
flat
really
earther.
want those top speakers to work. All right, and Pioneer
Yeah.
has posted manuals for their those
Yeah.
speakers, and they basically in the manual say that you shouldn't buy the towers.
Yeah, yeah, it's hilarious because yeah, they're saying if you want to use these upward firing drivers, they must be at or above ear height, right? So you cannot have your speakers lower than your ears when you're sitting down. However, they cannot be higher than one half of the height of your wall. Okay, so that gives you a kind of a
Do
narrow
they come with
region
a
there.
slide ruler? They should come with
I
a
know.
slide ruler.
And they actually say right in their own manual, because of this, we actually recommend our bookshelf speakers more highly because you can choose appropriate height stands. I'm like, that is hilarious. That is awesome that they're saying don't buy our towers because
This
they might not be the right height for where you're sitting. The other thing is though, like,
I think Dolby's going to be this Atmos is going to be such a success. It's going to take the world by storm.
Tom was rightfully worried about, lots of people take their front bookshelf speakers and put them in a bookshelf or put them in an entertainment unit or hang them off the wall or put them in some other non-optimal location. This is a pretty common thing. They're like, well, your ceiling's got to be between 8 and 14 feet. It's got to be flat. It's got to be hard and reflective. The speakers have to be at least 3 feet away from you. They can't be closer than 2 feet from the wall, or they shouldn't be anyway. And then they have to be just this correct height. And I'm like, wow. Okay, all right. I mean, that's fine. You laid out how and when these things are going to function properly. I'm there's no way people are actually going to follow these rules.
Yeah, not happening.
Yeah, rules. Giving consumers this many rules to follow about exactly where they have to place their speakers
Do
and then
you,
making it
how
so
many of us
confusing.
actually read the manuals anyways? I mean, I know you do, but
I do.
I don't. I don't. I don't read the manual until something goes wrong. I mean, that's how everybody's supposed to do it. You start setting stuff up and go, what the hell? It's smoking. Oh, it's an Onkyo. It does that? Okay.
The Denon
All right.
one had the Denon one had the craziest thing because they still have DTS Neo X, which is the
Yeah,
current
yeah.
thing that can expand you to 11 speakers by adding front heights and front wides, and all throughout the manual. It gives you the DTS Neo X 11.1 logo, so they're like, yep, it can do 11 speakers, and then they keep talking about only being able to use 9. I'm like, maybe that's only because they have 9 amplifiers built into the unit itself, so they keep mentioning setting up DTS Neo X with 9 speakers, and then in like this little sidebar section of setting up 11 speakers, it's like, if you want to use DTS Neo X with 11 speakers all at once, for some reason, even though there's 9 amps built into the receiver, you have to use at least 4 channels of external amplification. It can't use all 9 inside and just 2 external amps for DTS Neo X for some reason that is not explained at all. I'm like, well, that's fun. That's not going to trip somebody up. Thanks, Dan. Man.
That's awesome. All right, so we have a speculation question. Once again, Gary likes it. Infinite Gary likes to give us these. Do we think we'll see DTS UHD announced for AV receivers at the next CES? Okay, so real quick, DTS UHD is the object-based system that DTS announced a while back. They've demoed it before. Basically, all the stuff I said that I wish Dolby Atmos would do, DTS has basically already announced that's what they're going to do. You can put your speakers wherever the hell you want. The UHD will kind of figure it out and then do the best it can to create a good surround overhead underfoot system based on that. Okay, based on what it's like, I got 5 speakers on one side and 1 on the other. Deal with it. DTS is like, I'll do my best. I'm a miracle worker here. So do we think that we'll see this announced at the next CES? CES is in January, not a chance.
Mm-hmm.
I think there'll be a demo of it. I think they'll be showing it off and talking about it. But no, not a chance. Cedia next year. See, because Cedia is it's only a couple of weeks away now, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, it's only
Yeah,
a
it's
couple
coming
weeks
up.
away.
A couple weeks into September there.
September. For a while it was in October. It was over my birthday, but they changed it. Anyways, they have. I think not this CEDIA, but next CEDIA is when we'll see DTS UHD. And I don't know if it came out yet for Audioholics. I should check that real quick. But I wrote another article, a follow-up article to my last one. Basically, I said, yeah. They changed the name of it again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I said I named it something like 4 ways that Dolby Atmos can be saved, and they changed it to Dolby Atmos can gain consumer appeal.
Oh, I see.
Whatever. Anyways, I wrote that as well, and I postulated that I think that what the reason that Atmos has got so many weird restrictions and stuff, I think it's because of 2 things. One, I think Dolby rushed Atmos to market to try to get as much market penetration as possible before DTS came out. Think about your Blu-rays. How many times do you see Dolby, True HD versus DTS Master Audio? Because I see Master Audio hell of a lot more than I see Dolby. It might still be on there, I don't know, but I usually see DTS. I think they're trying to get market penetration. Second, I think that a lot of the problems Dolby's having is that they've rushed this to market, and therefore manufacturers are scrambling to try to implement these things, and they don't have, it's just too quick. So
certainly looks like Onkyo is.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of what we're seeing with this. But Dolby was, their ProLogic or whatever it was, came out before DTS's did, and that certainly didn't stop DTS from crushing them under their jackbooted heel. Not that they were unsuccessful; they were definitely successful. But DTS certainly did not seem to be lacking penetration. So I think that that this is just the beginning of this war. And if DTS comes out and Atmos has to completely spoil people on the idea of additional speakers in their room, that I think that we're gonna see a real interesting, not quite format war, but sort of a little bit of a war going on here. And if DTS does half of what it says it does, it'll be twice as not stupid as Atmos is. So.
Yeah, that was the other fun thing in the manuals was that Dolby Pro Logic, which of course we've all been used to for years and years now, it's gone. There is no Dolby Pro Logic in these new receivers anymore because they've replaced that sort of idea of being able to expand existing 2 or 5.1 or 7.1 channel soundtracks to make use of all the speakers that you now have. They've just replaced it under the name Dolby Surround, which, that's exactly the same name as they used back when it was 4 channels. So they've just repurposed that name now, but instead of calling it Pro Logic, they're just now saying Dolby Surround, and it will expand things to use whatever speakers you now have, with the exception of Dolby Surround will never create front-wide channels that aren't already in an Atmos mix. So fans of front wides can't use Dolby Surround. You're still going to be using Audyssey DSX or DTS Neo X. But in terms of DTS UHD coming out, I actually found a fun article. This was back in March of this year, but they got together a representative from Oro 3D Audio, Dolby Atmos, and DTS. At the time, they were calling it MDA, Multi-Dimensional Audio. And they had sort of an open discussion and sort of, state your case. Why is your version of quote-unquote immersive audio, this expansion beyond what the 7.1 channels that we have right now, why is their version sort of the best version? And they all sort of make their case. And the whole thing is that, both DTS and Oro take pot shots at Dolby because Dolby Atmos is a proprietary system. It's a licensed system. If you want to make Dolby Atmos equipment and soundtracks, you have to license that stuff from Dolby and pay them a fee. Whereas DTS is saying they want MDA, now called DTS UHD, to be an open standard. They want to just have the standard out there. You don't pay royalties. You don't pay licensing fees. This is just the way it's done now, and go ahead, make use of it. Oro is still a channel-based system, so I don't know if they're going to survive this whole three-way battle that seems to be looming here. But yeah, more than anything, that's why Dolby is pushing so hard, because they're like, we would like to make money off of our version. We don't like this idea of it being free and open, because that doesn't put any money in our pockets. So they're racing out there and trying to get all the studios on board, which makes sense from a financial standpoint. If DTS can do what they're saying and actually become an open standard, obviously they're all going to flock over there, because why pay a royalty to do the same thing?
Yeah, well, you can see right here, I just clicked on that link and I scrolled right down to the bottom. It says some common questions and answers. Question, how is MDA, this is UHD for the DTS, how is that DTS different from Dolby Atmos? The primary differences are, one, UHD comes with no preconceived speaker configuration, adapts to the needs of the cinema. Yes! Number two, is it open standard inviting development from SMPTE and the industry? Yes! MDA is royalty free. I think I smell success. I smell success. I'm sorry, you're giving it away. I think that there'll be some adoption of the free stuff. I think that might happen.
That's
That
also
might be a
less
thing.
restrictive and more open to suggestion from the rest of the industry. Yeah, it all sounds very good. However, I mean, it's still under development, and
Yeah.
we don't know exactly how close it is to coming to market. What we can say is, I've never gone to any movie theater and had it be a DTS UHD soundtrack. That
No.
just hasn't happened yet.
No.
So, there's going to have to be content made. I'm thinking it should be possible to adapt Dolby Atmos soundtracks
Well, the
to
idea
a
is
game,
that
but
I think
then you'd have to pay a
yeah.
royalty. So
We'll see. We'll see.
we'll see.
I'm done speculating on this.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question was, when do we think we'll see it? I don't know if we'll see it in AV receivers
Hmm.
before a year from now. I don't even. I think we'll see
Yeah,
an
I think
announcement maybe a year from now, but it's probably 2 years out. I think.
yeah, because they'd
So
have to be implementing that now as we speak because they're
well, you
already
think
in
about it.
development
We've got
for many years.
yeah, yeah. Well, we've got uh, Dolby Atmos is just hitting receivers, and it's been in
Hmm.
theaters for what, 6 months now?
It was 2012.
Has it really been that long?
Yeah, Brave came out in 2012, and that was the very first Dolby
Oh,
Atmos
yeah,
soundtrack ever. Yeah.
okay. Don't care about that. John wants to know if we were buying right now, would we pick the PS4 or the Xbox One? Rob.
Well, if gun to my head, I have to choose one. I would choose the PS4. It's less expensive. It's smaller. It's easier to use in terms of its menus. PlayStation Plus, as far as paying the yearly fee so you can do multiplayer gaming online, they give you a whole lot more stuff than Xbox Live. I mean, Xbox Live, they're now giving you like one free game a month, but PlayStation Plus is giving you at least two free games a month and some other promotions and discounts and stuff too. So it's the better deal, and it's $50 a year instead of $60 a year like Xbox Live. So all of that stuff added up, I like the PS4. Of course, the caveat is if there's an exclusive game that you really really want on Xbox One, well, that just made the decision for you. So yeah, they're more similar than different, but I do like the PS4 a bit more.
I think beforehand, I think, do we both agree that we thought the Xbox One? Did we think that last time? I don't remember what we said.
I don't remember
I
from the
don't
last
either.
time we talked about these systems.
Yeah, that was Liz. Liz was around on that one.
That's right.
I don't remember that. Anyhow, I don't remember what I said. I think I said Xbox One. I'm not sure. I think Liz said PS4, and we both said Xbox One. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Anyways, since these game systems have come out, I have seen absolutely nothing, nothing, nothing that even in the slightest way, even in the depths of my little gamer heart, that makes me think I kind of would want one of those. Maybe, if someone gave one to me. Nothing. Nothing. I haven't seen any game graphics that I thought were all that fantastic. I haven't read any reviews. I haven't seen any videos. I haven't heard of any features. Nothing. Nothing that I can't do with a Chromecast that I want to do with one of these game systems. Nothing. $60 a month, $50. I mean, a year for the no. I don't know. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't think so. I don't think so. Terrible.
I can tell you I have not talked to my Xbox One in a very, very long time. So that feature has not won me over.
Yeah. So there you go. All right. So neither, John. I'm sorry. I just can't. I've been trying. I can't. My kids are like, when are we going to get an Xbox One? I'm like, when someone gives one to us, and then I won't even set it up. There you go. We'll have it in a box. Maybe someone will give you the box, because I'll take the box. Not happening. Paul wants to know if it's just him or us too. He took his 11-year-old Sony home theater in a box to recycling depot after it had been doing nothing but gathering dust for the past 4 years. It was his first surround sound system, and he actually felt a bit sad when he dropped it in the blue bin. He'd like to know if we've ever felt the same way. Do we have any old AV equipment that we're emotionally attached to? I have a lot of old AV equipment that I literally can't get rid of because it's not mine. Like at any moment now, I've emailed them. I'm like, I still have your crappy speakers. Will you please take them back? And they ignore me. But if I can't sell them because they're not mine. I can't give them away. Though I do permanently lend them to people with the caveat, hey man, if they ever ask for them back, I need them. And people are like, yeah, okay. That's happened before, but I got stuff I can't get rid of. Emotionally attached to, no. I've me at this point in my AV life, the only time I get really emotionally attached to something is when if by getting rid of it, I won't have a thing that I need. Like I'm not getting it
Mm.
replaced with something like if someone said, Tom, we need that projector, or I need it, or someone stole my projector or took my new X4000, I'd be like, I don't have a receiver anymore. That would be a problem. But other than that, no, I'm not emotionally attached to this stuff.
I have plenty of stuff that I should part ways with. I've become an AV hoarder, I guess. Yeah, I don't know if it's an emotional thing. I think my Pioneer Kuro TV, I have not been able to bring myself to part ways with it. Even though I have more TVs than I really have room for in my apartment, why one man by himself in an apartment needs multiple TVs does make me a crazy person. But yeah, I haven't been
It's
able
not
to.
cats.
I haven't been able to bring myself to part with my Pioneer Kuro Plasma, so that's the one I'll say I'm
There's
attached
still
to.
that. I guess in the back of your mind, there's always the thought that someday you will be buying a house, and then there'll be plenty of
Well,
places for
it's
TVs.
also still just flat out the best TV I own. I mean, if it did 3D and it didn't buzz, then it would be perfect. So
It buzzes.
it buzzes. It does have an audible buzz.
Of course it does. All right. A while back, Paul asked us about the name brand audio upgrades offered in cars. He sprung for the Harman Kardon upgraded audio system, the car he purchased, and he feels like it was well worth the money. So he's glad we discussed it and said that it would be worthwhile. You're welcome. We always like helping people spend money, I suppose. That being said, he has a fondness for B&W Bowers and Wilkins speakers just as a brand.
Hmm.
He doesn't plan on ever owning any B&W speakers. What he does want to buy are the B&W P7 headphones. Honestly, just because they're B&W. Is that a crazy mentality, especially since he can't demo them locally? So he'll be ordering them online. And have Tom and or Rob ever bought any AV gear strictly because of the brand name? I certainly have. I bought my Axiom audio speakers
Ah.
unheard based on reviews and stuff I had read online, and I was perfectly happy with them. But I had done my due diligence, and you need to make sure you do your due diligence and don't just hang out on forums of people who love B&W headphones. All right? Because you really need to read as much as you can about them and read through the BS and try to get to the heart of it and just talk to people who actually, or read the stuff that people have posted that have actually owned them and listened to them. That being said, I was sent the P5s for review, and I sent them back because they were crap. Uh, they were so bad that I was convinced that they had been broken somehow in transport.
Hmm.
Convinced. Like I could not fathom that these were supposed to sound this way. So I sent them back and said, "Listen, these
Reminds me
got to
of a
be broken."
certain digital or Class D amplifier not that long ago.
Yeah, I just said that there's got to be something wrong with them. So I sent them back, and they said, "No, no, they're fine." I'm like, "Those are crap headphones." So I was at CEDIA last year, and BW had a setup there where they had all their little headphones set up, and you could plug your own phone in and listen to your own stuff, right?
Hmm.
So it wasn't just their things. You could plug your phone in and listen to your own stuff. So that's what I did, and they had the P5s, and I put them on. I'm like, "Yep, crap." And then put them down. I put them in the P7s. I was like, "Wow, these are a lot better." I was seriously impressed with with how much better they were. Now, better than crap is not hard to achieve, but these sounded like pretty good, decent headphones for the couple of minutes I demoed them on a show floor. That being said, there are headphones, so they did have noise isolation sort of stuff.
Hmm.
They're very cool. I remember them being comfortable, I think, but they definitely sounded pretty good. Do I think you should spend? What are they, like $400? Is that what they are?
Gosh, I'm not even sure.
They are $400. Do I
Yep.
think you should spend $400 on those? No. But that being said, if you want to, I don't think you would be unhappy. I think you would
Right.
get headphones that you would like. And I think you would get headphones that sound good. Do I think they could sound as good as they should sound for $400? Probably not. But they're going to sound pretty good. I would love to have some more time with them because those are headphones I think I could probably get behind and really give a decent review to. Those P5s, especially if they were supposed to sound that way, I thought for sure they were broken. That's how bad they were. but the P7s were way better. So yes, if Paul, if you really want to buy them, and then don't listen to anything, don't read anything about them ever again, and then just be happy with what you've done.
So yeah, I mean, now that you've heard that and you've got at least okay, at least they're not total crap. I mean, now the funny thing is you're not buying them purely because they're Bowers and Wilkins. Now you're buying them because they're Bowers and Wilkins and you're already predisposed to like the brand, but you've also heard that they're not so bad. At the very least, they're not so bad, and maybe they're even quite good. So there you go. Now you feel great. I mean, I do think the mentality of buying something purely because of the brand name is a little bit nuts.
yeah.
Because I mean, even what you were saying with the Axiom is just like it wasn't really just because of the brand name Axiom. It was because you had read a bunch of reviews.
Oh
And then
well, yeah. It
you
was
read
had
it.
nothing to do with the
So
brand name. I bought them unheard, though. That was sort
right,
of. Have I ever
yeah.
done?
So I mean, yeah, a similar thing for me. Like I end up mentioning my Kuro TV. I mean, I bought that because it was a Kuro TV. I didn't actually view my exact model before I bought it because I got mine once the Kuro line had already been discontinued, and so I called around to a bunch of places until I found somebody who still had one, and I bought it sight unseen. So yeah, that was me buying it because it was the name Kuro. But I don't know, like it wasn't just because it was the name Kuro, it was because it was a
Right.
Kuro and had a long history of being excellent, and I wanted to get one. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah. Okay. That being said, I have got the new PM2 headphones from Oppo in for review. Those
Oh
came in.
yeah,
They are the same freaking headphones.
as the PM ones,
They are the same. Like I was
they're
shocked.
cheaper.
I was like, these are the same headphones, but they're not. They use synthetic leather instead of lambskin, and they don't come with the velour ear pads. They just come with like the whatever the faux leather stuff is, or
Okay.
maybe it's real leather, but it's not lambskin. And instead of having metal and chrome all over them, they have plastic in places. I'm like, yeah, it's the same driver, it's the
Hmm.
same design. They look exactly the same, and they're like $400 cheaper. I'm like, who is buying the other ones? Because they sound the same to me. Like I have to go because Gene's got the other ones. I am seriously considering taking a ride to Gene's house just to go get
Hmm.
those headphones and say, listen, we've got to do an A/B with this real quick because this is crazy. These can't be the same headphones, but I think they are. I think they're the same headphones.
Well, that's pretty awesome
Yeah.
because
So
they're
if I was going to spend $400 on Ballers and Welkins, I would spend $700 on these Oppos because they're going to be way better. Um, that being said, I did listen to some. I did some that Dr. Chesky's
yes.
surround mix thing with those. I can never get the sound to go in front of my eyes.
Uh huh.
Whenever it's supposed to
Well,
be
I mean
circling around
that's
your head, it just
yeah.
goes. It goes right behind my head and then over my head. It follows the band,
Hmm.
but I can't get it to go in front.
But
And
that's not necessarily the headphones' fault at all, because that's a binaural recording. It depends on what head-related transfer function they put inside the recording,
yeah, I don't know what
which
was going on,
is
but I can't get it to
the
go in front.
dummy heads.
Now
Yeah.
the bass sweeps and stuff like that is like this is a 60 hertz, and they play a tone, and then they play
Hmm.
a 40, and they go to by 10. They sound exactly the same until you get to 20, and then you're just like really,
Nice.
it's really hard to hear. It
I'm
becomes
sure. Yeah.
softer, but I'm not just sure. I'm not sure if it's soft, if it's actually softer, or if it's just I can't hear it as well because it's 20 hertz.
Yeah.
But it
That could be
sounds.
your ears, not
That's
the
exactly.
earphones.
But the rest of it sounds really good. The bass on those
Nice.
things are just amazing. And they're just not that hard to drive. I mean, those headphones, I just can't believe they're the same. I'm like, you should have done something to make them sound worse so that people would feel justified in spending
Well, that's why we like
$1,100.
Oppo. That's not their style. They're like, yep, you get what we can do for this price point while remaining in business. I'm like, yay, that's the way we would hope things would be.
So if you want all the bells and whistles, and literally the bells and whistles have nothing to do with the Sonics, then get the other ones. But if you just want all the performance, and I did read a review where the guy had done some measurements with the ear pads, and they were slightly different. The PM2
Ah,
the ear pads were measured slightly different. I'm like, that could have been for so many reasons that have nothing to do with the ear pads,
I'm assuming
So
he at least took them off his head to change out the ear pads, so they
no,
might have
it
given
was
them a
measurements.
slightly.
Yeah,
Oh, measurements.
it was
Okay.
with
Well,
measurements.
still, he still would have had to remove them from whatever he was measuring them from, right?
Yeah.
Slightly different positions could make that difference, not
Yeah,
just taking
exactly.
ear pads. Yeah.
But Yeah, he's like, I don't know. Anyways, so that's it. That's it's 11 o'clock.
It is.
So let's instead of doing some of the new stuff we were talking about doing, let's not do any of that. Let's just end this podcast.
I'll just mention if you want to get a new large TV that also happens to be 4K resolution, Vizio's P series are showing up on Amazon now, and it is pretty darn compelling when you can get a 70-inch ultra high definition television from Vizio with how many zones of dimming does that thing have?
Is that
90 or something?
256 or is it that?
No. It's not that high, but it does have local dimming. Let's see, the 70-inch is going for $2,500, which is a pretty good price for a 70-inch TV, no matter how you cut it.
Yeah, for
And
sure. I don't know. We don't know how many. It's got zones. That's
it does have local dimming. I think it was 90. Oh, 72. It says 72 active zones, so it's not that many active zones.
Oh, it's not the. It's not the. Which one? It's the P series.
Yep, P
Oh,
series.
so it's not the whatever that. It's the high end one, the M
Oh,
series.
that was the reference series, which I think is vaporware. I don't
We're
think
never
that's
coming out. That's right. Yeah,
pretty
so
cool.
there's a 55-inch too. It doesn't say how
It has
many.
60
That was
zones.
$1,400
Yeah, I know.
on Amazon.
$1,400, man.
It doesn't say how many zones that has. I'm sure it's got someplace.
It
64,
does.
64 active zones on that one.
There you go.
So there you go. All right. Contact us at Rob at AVRant, Tom at AVRant. Come to the website, avrant.com, and comment. Facebook.com/AVRant. Email, I said email. Twitter us tweet us at @FirstReflectForRob, at AVRant_Tom for me. Send us your AV questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
We'll start the after party in a few seconds, guys. Ooh, that's not good. See you in a... I'm going to try to stop this. There we go. See you in a few.